Connie said, there are several bills at the legislature dealing with this, funding this work to continue, as well as other bills, which I'm happy to speak about if anyone has questions later. I don't want to divert us, but about police accountability when there's a death in custody, for example, or the fact that police reports should be readily available to the public to see whether the police are in fact doing their job. So I'll wrap it up there. There's been great strides made. You're very lucky to have a great chief and Chief Reed, who's really trying to get ahead of it and wants to understand if there is an issue, and I know that he'd be the first person to work on it if he found one. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind words, David, and thanks for the work that you do. Alphonse Wright is the chairman of the African American Affairs Commission, which is a commission appointed by the governor here in the state of Connecticut. And so I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and I'll be very short. I will just say ditto to everything that Mr. McGuire said. And I am the chair of the Connecticut State African American Affairs Commission. I'm newly elected as in January. But one of my first acts as a chair, I got an invitation from Chief Reed and from Mayor Anwar to come and talk, and I said, isn't this interesting? What have I done now? But we had a very, I think, a very good open conversation, and I too want to acknowledge the chief and the mayor for, well, I would say, instituting this conversation. The role, the process of getting this racial profiling going, as has been mentioned, has been a steady uphill climb. The AAAC, the African American Affairs Commission, has been somewhat instrumental in that. In fact, we were instrumental in obtaining a grant to really get that process going and pull the chiefs of police together and have that process going. That's been going on about 3 or 4 years, but now some of that is coming to fruition. And in terms of what we do as the African American Affairs Commission, part of our mission is to look after the welfare of African Americans in the state of Connecticut from a political, social, education, and health standpoint. And this covers that aspect as well. One particular thing I want to make mention is we've heard the term competency an awful lot. One of the things that I think we need to take a look at is cultural competency. And what I mean by that is, if you are driving down the street and a black policeman stops you, all right, what's going through his head? I'm not trying to get inside his head, but his experience is going to have him act in a particular way. A white police officer, his experience is going to have him act in a particular way. But there are cultural competencies, cultural customs, that if we become aware, we can be a little more open-minded and reasonable to that particular situation when it occurs. Now, I'm not trying to say that's a panacea, because it is not. That is something that I've been dealing with for a fair amount of time, and it keeps coming up. Cultural competencies, like any other kind of competencies, it helps to a certain degree. So I will stop there, and I'll be available and open for any questions that may have as we go along.
As we start our questions, I wanted to actually have 2 more people just weigh in and make a couple of statements if they would like to, and I wanted to start with Azeka with some of the work you're doing.
Sure, thank you. Good night, everyone. So I just want to say that I want to commend the chief and the mayor. I had an inkling that something was going to happen, because the mayor and I had a conversation some time back, and the chief. And this is the way we should be doing it. Getting ahead of the curve. Having the community and the police have a dialogue, because those numbers by themselves meant nothing. The way the chief explained it definitely had an opportunity to erase a lot of unnecessary questions or fears or concerns. And one of the things that I admire about the South Windsor Police Department is that they are doing the community policing concept, which is really a philosophy and a practice And if more departments were to do that, then I think some of the issues that we're having across the country would be smaller. So I just want to say kudos to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm put on the spot a little bit. Ken Barone from Central Connecticut State University. We were the institute that was tasked by the governor a couple years ago to implement this new law. A couple quick things I want to say. Okay, in the state of Connecticut last year, 630,000 people were stopped in a motor vehicle by police. It is the most common interaction that a member of the public will have with law enforcement. That's why when we talk about traffic stops and the data that comes from traffic stops and why is so much attention put on traffic stops, that's why. It's because it is that most common interaction that will occur. What I would say to you is that we're just beginning this conversation. We've spent a lot of time building a system to collect information to help us make more informed decisions. And the report that the chief was referring to was an initial report that came out in September that made no attempt to analyze any data. It was a statutory requirement where we said, here's the data for stops that we collected over a 7-month period. We'll come back to you when we're ready to do this because we want to make sure we do it right. And we're actually going to be coming out with the first full analysis of traffic stops in the state of Connecticut on April 2nd, and we'll be presenting that to the legislature. Connecticut, I would argue that Connecticut will have the most advanced analytical system available and that will be used than any other state in the nation. The chief referred, when he was going through data, to the percentage of minorities that were stopped in South Windsor compared to a variety of different things. Oftentimes our instinct is to compare who's stopped to who lives in a community, and I think we could all agree that there, particularly if you look at South Windsor in particular, there are a lot of things that might drive people into South Windsor, and there's a lot of things that might drive folks away if they don't work in South Windsor. So the driving population of South Windsor is constantly changing, and we've developed a system where individual communities' data will be run through 5 tests, right? Each test is significant, and each test also has some limitations to it. And what I will note is that when this has been done around the country, and this has been done in about 30 other states over the last 10 years, each state or each jurisdiction has only used one of these tests. And based on the use of just one test, we're talking again a statistical test that data is run through, they have been able to make conclusions or draw conclusions that profiling might be occurring. We've decided to take the task, and it was a big task, to say why use one test when we can use 5? And the idea being that if you're a town that is consistently registering as an outlier in multiple of those tests, then you're a town as a state that we want to look at, particularly because there are 106 police agencies, and as a state it's very difficult for us to try and determine where to focus our attention as a state. So we're using it sort of as a screening tool. And so I think you can look forward to that coming out on April 2nd. The idea is to give chiefs the tools to be able to make better, more informed, data-driven decisions. I think what you will find in the outcome of that report is that there aren't that many departments that are what we might term racial profiling per se. But there is a disparity that exists in Connecticut, and I would argue it probably exists nationally, where minorities are more likely to be stopped, they're more likely to be searched, and they're less likely to have anything on them when they're searched. And I lost my train of thought for a minute there. The point that I was trying to make is that what you'll find is that it's not because the men and women standing in the back are racist or stop somebody because of the color of their skin, but oftentimes what we're finding is that the numbers are oftentimes driven by unconscious biases that exist in all of us and that exist in every profession. And I recently read a study about the medical profession and the disparities that exist in in emergency rooms. An individual that's white comes in with a certain type of ailment, and the doctor will prescribe them some sort of a prescription and send them home. An individual of black or Latino descent comes in presenting the same symptoms, and they're oftentimes sent home with Tylenol because there is a perception that black or Latino males in particular are drug users, right? Is that true? No. But the point is that this idea of unconscious bias isn't something that just exists with law enforcement. It exists with lawyers and judges and medical professionals and even, I'm sure, the places where you work. And the idea is that we've got a system put in place after the data comes out to start to work with a profession that the reason why a lot of time and attention is focused on this profession is because they're one of the few professions that has the ability to stop people's free movement through society. We give them that authority. We give them the power to stop me from driving to where I want to go, or to stop walking from where to where I want to go, again, I lost my train of thought. We give them that authority, and so therefore we hold them to a higher standard than sometimes we even hold ourselves. So what I would ask you here today in having this conversation is to maybe reflect for a minute about some of the biases that you yourself might hold that you don't even know you hold. One of the things I do sometimes when I go to talk about implicit bias with anybody is I start off the conversation by going around and I introduce myself and I shake people's hands and I say, hi, I'm Ken Barone. And when I shake their hand, I oftentimes don't do it the way I normally would. And I give a really weak and sort of feeble handshake because there's a perception that whether you know it or not, you're making about the way that I present myself and about the way in which I shake my hand. Because when we don't know information about somebody, we start to fill in the blanks based on our past experiences. And that's what I think Mr. Wright was addressing and David was addressing. And that's where this conversation needs to go. This conversation needs to be less about profiling and more about bias. So
Thank you so much. All right. All right, so this is now the conversation starts, and we'd love to take your questions, but because of the value and importance of this discussion, if anybody wants to make a statement, please make it a short statement, and if it's followed by a question, that is fine. But in this situation, we want you to be able to make a statement. We don't want you. So there's one hand here, and I'll come to you in a second. Yes.
Hi, my name is Roy Mondale, and first let me say thank you, Chief, sir. Thank you, Chief, and to all you officers. I'm a 20-year resident of South Windsor, and I feel very safe, and I really appreciate the work that you do, and I don't take it for granted. One of my concerns, and this is my oldest son, Marcus, he's 24, I have another son who's 20, and growing up in the town, they never really had the opportunity of seeing a black male police officer. And I know that would help not only black young kids, but all kids to be exposed to that. Plus with the department to be able to intermingle with races. So I'm looking at your numbers, 43 officers, it would be nice to have 2. I know at one time there was an African-American woman here. So are you doing anything to address bringing in black or minority officers?
Oh, you're going to run back and forth.
Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate that. That's a thoughtful question, and I get asked that quite frequently. This day and age, the hiring process isn't quite as complicated as it once was. You don't have to get a paper application, you don't have to venture. When I had to drive to South Windsor from Springfield, where I grew up, and I had to figure out how to get across the Bissell Bridge and the toll and come to South Windsor Town Hall in order to get an application. Well, of course, we don't do that anymore. It's all online. So we think we now reach more potential applicants than we ever have because of the online system we use. We use a system now that perhaps 30 or 35 departments in the state of Connecticut use, where you go online to a single location, and at that one location you can fill out an application and apply to all 30 of those police departments all at once. Or you can apply to 10 of them. You pick the ones that you want. You put in your basic information, your basic work history, simple resume, and you can apply. Literally in 30 minutes you can apply to 30 police departments. Folks say, well, should we, when we get together to talk about a hiring process, we say, well, is there a way we can reach out to attract more minority applicants? Is there a publication that perhaps is widely circulated in the minority community that we should be advertising in? And then we sit back and we think about it and we say, if you were a person who wanted to be a police officer. Part of the first step in the process is figuring out, what do I need to do to apply? Quite frankly, if you can't figure out, if a person can't figure out how do I go about applying, it begins to bring into question their ability to be able to go through the training and to actually perform the job, because it is a relatively simple process. Now, is that a bad way to think about it? I'm not sure, but I think right now we reach more potential applicants than we ever have because of the internet marketing that we do. And the other side of it is, if somebody wants to be a police officer, they should be able to go to their own computer, go to a public library, Google Connecticut police officer. And I guarantee you, when you do that, the company that we use, the site we use to process applications, is going to be one of the first hits that you get. You'll see policeapp.com. You click on that and it'll say, do you want to apply and be a police officer? Here's all the great things about being a police officer, and you can start your application just like that. So that's how we try to entice any applicant. And you're right, unfortunately we don't get a huge pool of minority applicants each time we go out to test. But I agree with you that it would be great if our workforce had more black males, black females, Hispanics, anybody, because our strength is in our diversity, and I think it's important that we have a community police officers that closely represents the community that they police. Mr. Wright wants to do this.
I'd like to have a response to your question, and I'd like the Chief, as they said. I was a member of the State Board of Education from 91 to 95. And we had arbitrators, and the same kind of situation came up. It was a matter, it wasn't a quota, it was a matter of having arbitrators who were representative of the population at large. And the Board of Education went through its, quote, normal system for 6 months, and no one showed up. So we started asking questions. Well, why is this? The normal system. And there are times when you want to do something, you have to go beyond the normal system, not illegal, but just the normal system. So one of the things that was suggested is, one, are there any minority recruiting firms out there? Are there African American organizations? Are there churches? All of these avenues that are available. So I don't know if South Windsor has done that. I understand they have a system in place, but if we're really looking at that, might be an avenue that could be used. I'm not saying it's going to present the results that you're looking for, but it may open it up. And one other thing that the Chief said, I'd just like to add a comment to. If you're used to doing something a certain way, you'll know to do it. But if you're not used to doing something a certain way, you're not going to know to do it. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It's just, that's just the way it is. And what I've just talked about now is some, I mentioned before, cultural competencies. These are some of those cultural competency things that are out there. Not that it's wrong or right if you follow them or don't follow them. It's just that's the way that it is. One other thing I just want to do quickly. There's a quote that I want to pass along, and I want to pass it along to the Chief and his department. And I'll make the reference. It's not within our power to place the divine teachings directly into someone's heart. All we can do is place them on the surface of the heart so that when the heart breaks, they drop in. Now, as far as I'm concerned, and the action I've had with the South Windsor Police Department and the Chief and the Mayor, these issues have been placed on their heart, and I know their heart is soft enough to open up and take these in. That's how much I respect this South Windsor group.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
My question, I kind of a comment and a question for Chief Reed. Of the stops on Route 5, how many of them are at night? And if most of them are at night, how can you tell whether someone's Episcopal or Baptist or what? The second part is, does this work? Let's see. Are these drivers that are coming through and tabulated in South Windsor, are they transients or are these people who live in town? if they're transients, shouldn't their numbers then be tacked to the town that they belong to?
Right, and that's part of the, I'm going to use controversy for lack of a better term, but that's part of the issue with the statistics and the estimated driving population. Who are the pool of drivers that we are picking from when we stop? You're right, many of the drivers, and that was kind of the point I was trying to make, many of the drivers on Route 5 are just traversing South Windsor. They're just moving through, and they have no affiliation with our community other than it's a way for them to get to the Bissell Bridge or a way for them to get to some point south or some point north. So you're right. And that's why we don't know exactly what the pool of drivers are that are out on those particular roads that pass through. And then your first comment, trying to think of what it was, your first question. At nighttime.
More night?
Right. That I didn't break them down for each of those officers for day-night. The statistics that Mr. Barone and his group have collected, they do include time of stops. You know, when you start to collect statistics like this, the spreadsheet gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you go. Well, we want race, we want ethnicity, we want sex, we want to know their age, where do they live, town of origination, town of end. But most of those data points we collect. There are some that we don't collect. And then you need a more powerful tool to analyze them other than what I can do sitting at my desk counting how many white males, how many black males, how many black females. That's relatively easy. So I don't have the answer to the daytime, nighttime. Your comment, though, is very correct when you say when you stop a driver at night, how are you able to tell what church they go to when they pass by you? Because it's dark out. You don't know if the person is black, if they're white, if they're of Indian descent, or if they're Hispanic nationality. You have no idea of knowing that. Correct.
Those are great questions, and the group that Ken is with, there was a data working group that met, and there were law enforcement officials and statisticians and civil libertarians and CHRO, all in this trying to figure out what should we collect and how should we analyze it. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that they've really taken a lot of that into account, such as the mall, such as people traveling to Hartford for work at a certain time of day, such as a way to filter out at night, for example. So all of that was thought of. That's why it's taken so long to get started on this collection, because they wanted to do it right from the start.
Hi, I just was curious, when you do stop someone, is there a check-off to check whether they're resident or non-residents when you stop them?
Yeah, we would, the data as to whether they are in town or not, that would be collected from their driver's license. For the statistical reporting that we're doing for the state by statute, residency is not one of the questions asked, right, Ken? It doesn't ask.
We ask Connecticut resident. We also ask if you're a resident of the town in which you're stopped.
Okay.
Wouldn't that help you then, when you were stopping people, to know whether they were residents or not?
It would, and that's what I think with Mr. Barone's total compilation of these numbers, perhaps it'll be reflected there as to how many people you stop are residents of your community and how many are not. I just want to say Senator Larson had planned to be here. You saw me messaging a few minutes ago. I wasn't being disrespectful, but he chose that time to say, gee, should I come? Am I going to make it from New Haven or not? But he got tied up down in New Haven. So Senator Larson sends his best. He was here, but he was not able to attend tonight.
And I think as we look at this data, it's going to start these conversations. And I think our town will be probably one of the first, or maybe the first at this time, to look at the data and start the conversations, because sometimes we can go into so much depth in it, but let's start the common sense. The common sense is good policing, good community interaction, having the partnership with each other. And then we can actually look at the data for years and years and years, but go back to the common sense approach of how a community needs to interact with each other and respect everyone. Go ahead.
So, I'm Steve Wagner. I'm a town councilor here. Is this on? Yes. First of all, I think what we're actually talking about is culture, and communities have culture, and organizations like the police department have a culture. And the culture is really controlled from two directions. One is from the leadership, and I think you're seeing an example of a very strong leadership contribution to culture, but I think it's also controlled by every single member at the ground level of an organization. You know, what are the conversations that happen in the locker room? What are the conversations that happen when two of you are sitting in a police car?